computer programs dueling with glowing discs on floating platforms, light cycles racing at breakneck speeds across neon grids, and the line between human and machine blurs. This is the world of Tron. Today, we're diving into the story behind the groundbreaking arcade game inspired by the film, exploring its console counterpart, and how this digital adventure played a role in reshaping gaming, from the challenges its ambitious creators faced to the incredible legacy it left behind. This is another side of Tron you're gonna want to see on the first episode of Arcade vs. Console Season 2. In 1982, the Tron arcade game hit the scene, bending 4 unique minigames into one unforgettable cabinet. It was an instant classic, drawing players into its glowing digital world. But what many don't realize is that this game wasn't just a fun tie-in. It was a technical marvel born from nearly impossible deadlines. The masterminds behind the game, George Gomez and Bill Adams, had only 6 months to turn Disney's sci-fi epic into an arcade experience. The goal? Recreate the most iconic scenes from the movie, like light cycle races, tank battles, and the fight against the MCP cone. But here's where things get interesting. One key element of the movie was missing: the legendary disc-throwing combat. Well, why wasn't it there? The answers lie in the challenges of the time. The disc battle scene in Tron was a showstopper in the movie and was originally planned to be one of the minigames in the arcade version. So what happened? Well, the developers were racing against the clock to deliver a finished game, and creating the disc combat mechanics proved too ambitious. Let's not forget, this was 1982. The hardware was limited, and squeezing in a 5th minigame would have pushed the system to its breaking point. Plus, the unique controls required for disc combat, aiming, throwing, and dodging were too complex to implement alongside the other games in such a short time.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
So the result was the disc combat concept was shelved temporarily. But the story doesn't end there. After the success of the original Tron arcade game, Bally Midway revisited the idea and gave the development team the time they needed to perfect it. Enter Discs of Tron. Released in 1983, this standalone game allowed players to step into their arena for thrilling one-on-one battles against Sark, the movie's villain. With 3D visuals, bouncing discs, and escalating levels of strategy, it became an instant fan favorite. And let's not forget the cabinet itself, a futuristic masterpiece with surround sound and immersive lighting. Players who stepped into the environmental cabinet were treated to a sensory experience unlike anything else in arcades at that time. It was a digital duel brought to life. So in 1982 and 1983, how would it have been possible to port these to console? Before we take a look at the arcade's console counterparts, let's watch some cringy 80s commercials.
In the not too distant future, somewhere time and space, J.G. Lion and her arcade pals are caught in an endless chase. If you're wondering how she eats and breathes and other science facts, la la la, just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. For cringy commercial theater, cringy commercial theater.
Not every great movie or great arcade.
Oh yeah, love me some 80s commercials.
That's why when Mattel Electronics turned Tron into Tron home video games,
Tron may fight for the users, but on the Atari 2600, he's mostly fighting to have more than 4 pixels to his name.
Against a recognizer, if you last that long. 4 great Tron games.
Probably a little bit of over-promising on this one.
Atari 2600 from Mattel Electronics. Games as good as we say they are.
Games as good as we say they are. Who needed a catchy slogan when you had a commercial narrator who would hypnotize you?
Asteroids, and then there was Tron. The Sunday family
Tron
film,
Discotheque Remix.
groundbreaking in its day. The science fiction cult classic. Tron, tonight at 7 on Sky Premiere.
Time magazine calls it a vision of the movie's future, sights that no eye, no camera has ever before beheld. UPI finds
Although
it
it
utterly
really
new,
wasn't that
vividly exciting,
well
a
received,
trip
was
and a
it?
half. Newsweek
80s
describes it as
commercials were
somewhere you've
so
never been,
dramatic.
a brave new world
They could make a
set
stick
inside
of
a
butter
computer
sound like
no
it had the
movie
power
has
to
ever looked
change
like
your
this
life.
before. Omni calls it an imaginative, spectacular film. Tron, rated PG, now playing at a theater near you. Check local listings.
Those were the days.
Mom, look! Just like the ad in Sunday's paper.
Kid must have found his way off the set of Pete's Dragon.
Why can we win?
Every kid in 80s commercials acted like they'd just been handed the keys to a Ferrari. Really, though, it was just a glow-in-the-dark yo-yo.
Plus, money-saving coupons. And get a free Tron t-shirt iron-on with the purchase of 2 participating Scott brands. Look for details on the Scott display at participating stores.
You can't stop the little toaster.
Tron Trivia. If you're not a fan of Tron, you might not know this, but in the original film, this is one of the scenes that was cut. Steven Lisberger and Harrison Ellenshaw even argued about the scene being cut from the film. The scene between Yori and Tron actually holds significant meaning because it's one of the main reasons why Tron realizes what he has to do. At the time, Lisberger said that he felt like it interrupted the flow of the film, but now regrets that they removed it. We kind of already covered this when we talked about Discs of Tron, but allegedly there was actually supposed to be 6 games originally on the 1982 arcade machine. But due to time and memory constraints, they obviously were not able to make that happen, which in turn spun off into Discs of Tron. There were actually 3 official different models of the Tron arcade cabinet in 1982. You had the standard upright model, and then you had the cabaret, and you also had a cocktail version. And here's a fun fact from my friend Joe over at Scarlet Sprites. And if you haven't checked out his channel, give it a look. He's pretty awesome.
I was pretty young in the early 80s, obviously. So I wasn't exactly allowed to just go into the arcades at that young of an age, but my first experience was playing arcades on a cocktail cabinet at Pizza Hut, which I think a lot of people are probably familiar with who are about my age. You know, one of the games that I played was Tron, and I know that a lot of people think of Tron in that upright cabinet, which is absolutely beautiful. That glowing blue joystick and all the artwork and just the way that whole cabinet presents it's really phenomenal. It's really a showcase cabinet, and if you have one, you're pretty lucky. But I played it on a cocktail cabinet, which I've looked in recent years and I haven't come across one of those in a while. But Tron and of course Pac-Man were 2 of the early games that I played at Pizza Hut, and that was really the first arcade experience that I can recall.
And did you know that there was a Discs of Tron game that was made for the Commodore 64? I don't think it was an official release, but I also don't know. And it was okay, I guess. Pretty interesting, though. A few other lesser-known facts. The working title for the game was originally Grid Bug. Early prototypes of the game included an unfinished Recognizer Dodge mode that was cut due to hardware limitations. The light cycle gameplay inspired a unique AI pathfinding technique for its time. The game's visual and audio design directly inspired scenes in Tron Legacy, particularly the light cycle battles. And lastly, when the game was originally released in arcades, it was released in Disneyland's Starcade. There were 12 cabinets, all with observer monitors. I think observer monitors on old arcades are really cool, so just a fun fact for you. So, home console versions of this game were released, but it was definitely not the arcade game. You had Deadly Discs, Adventures of Tron, Tron Mazatron, and Tron Solar Sailor. At least, those are the official releases. So let's take a look at these real quick. How did they fare to the arcade game? Well, I mean, really no comparison. Now, Solar Sailor did have vocals in it, which was pretty impressive for its time, and there was a lot going on the screen. Deadly Discs was definitely better on the Intellivision, but it was no Discs of Tron. The Atari 2600 version paled in comparison to the Intellivision version, which paled in comparison to Discs of Tron. I don't know, honestly, if you owned any of these consoles in the 80s like I did, I was pretty disappointed. Then Mazatron was like this weird Pac-Man ripoff thing. I don't know what it is there. It was just bad. And then you had The Adventures of Tron, which was also bad. And I think it was supposed to be somewhat like the MCP cone level maybe on the arcade, but it was bad. Well, because of the time that we lived in and the market, there was a lot of like homebrew games that would come out all the time, or that you could get code from a magazine and program it on your own. This was the closest thing to a light cycle game that we had at the time, Chicken Out, and I mean, it was okay, but it sucked. Later on, there were a few others that were released, but none of them were good. I mean, it left you fiending for the arcade version. But when you consider the technical substance of the arcade version of Tron and Discs of Tron, it's pretty hard to look at these consoles and think that we would have gotten anything better than what we did. While in the 80s there wasn't anything readily available in-home for us, it did eventually come our way. Fortunately, Arcade 1UP released Tron in 2021. Obviously, it's a downsized version of the arcade game, but it is faithful to the game. And it includes Discs of Tron as well. In current gen, it's also been ported to several other systems as well. But for me, as someone who grew up playing Tron in the arcades and was absolutely mesmerized by it, this was a special thing to have. And I would even go as far to say that Tron, the movie and the video game, both shaped me as a gamer in a way, and my views on pop culture. The colors, the lights, the idea of what the 80s was, not just in the sense of what we actually saw, but also in the sense of what we felt. It gave rise to something special, something I call neon dreams. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of the show. Stay safe out there, and until next time, I'll see you then.